How to make your very own Jayne Cobb Hero of Canton style beanie hat. For those of you who don't know who Jayne Cobb is, he is a space cowboy from the TV show Firefly. The man walks down the street in that hat. People know he's not afraid of anything. A free pattern's available at AmericanKnitter.com. Now let's get started. First, let's talk about colors. The colors that I've seen people use are not accurate. They'll use red for the ear flaps. It's actually kind of a carrot orange. It's a reddish orange. And then there's orange. The orange yarn that I have here should be almost more of a muted orange, but I couldn't find that, so I went with what I was able to get. And then a lot of people will use yellow yarn for the top. It's not yellow, it's more of a golden mustard color. For this project, we're going to be using a 41 peg loom. I will be using a Nifty Knitter brand. You can use whatever brand you want. So let's get started. We're going to work on the ear flaps. And so we will take the reddish orange or the dark orange and tie a slip knot. To tie a slip knot, you need to take 2 fingers and wrap the yarn around, and then in that loop that you just created, pull a strand through, and that creates a slip knot. Just pull it tight. Then we're going to put the slip knot around the 7th peg. So count 7 pegs over and slip it on that one. And now we are going to wrap each peg in a counterclockwise direction as we work in a clockwise direction around the loom for just 7 pegs. When we reach the 7th peg, we are going to wrap back. So we're going to loop over, and then we are going to wrap the next 6 pegs in a clockwise direction. So as you move clockwise, you wrap the pegs counterclockwise, and as you move counterclockwise, you wrap the pegs clockwise. I hope that makes sense. Once you've added 3 rows of yarn to these 7 pegs, we're going to take the bottom strand of yarn with the pick tool and pull it up and over the top of each peg. So now we have 2 rows of yarn left on the pegs. Then we're going to wrap again, so we have 3, and then pick off the bottom row. We're going to continue this until we've added 28 rows of yarn, and then we'll have finished the ear flap. So with 28 rows completed, it should look like this. And now we're ready to start on the other side. So just cut that yarn off, and we'll get back to it later. So we're going to go 7 pegs back from the tie-off peg. So count 7 pegs back, put the slip knot on that. So wrap and pick just as you did on the other side for 28 rows, then we'll be ready to do the rest of the hat. With the 2 ear flaps completed, it should look like this. We're now ready to work on the rest of the hat. Okay, so on this part of the hat, I want to show you on this empty loom just to make sure it's totally clear. So this right here is the 7th peg. And so this is where the ear flap starts on this side. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 right here, the 7th peg for 7 pegs on this side is where the ear flap starts on this side. To introduce the orange yarn, or the second color on the hat, we're going to tie a slip knot onto this peg here, the 6th peg. We're going to wrap to the 6th peg on this side of the loom. Then what we're going to do is pick. So we just do 1 row, and then we pick all of the pegs that have 3 strands of yarn. If it doesn't have 3 strands of yarn, don't worry about it. So it's basically just the ear flap parts of the beanie. Then when it's time to wrap another row of yarn, we are going to start on this side, but first we are going to increase onto this peg and wrap all the way around the loom, and then you'll end increasing on this side as well. So we will be here. So this is the 5th peg on both sides. Then you'll pick all of the pegs that have 3 strands of yarn, and then you'll increase when it's time to wrap again from this peg here. And you'll end on this peg here. Then after you've picked, you will increase before you wrap the rest of the pegs on here, all the way around and end here. Then after you've picked again, you will increase all the way around from here onto this peg. Then from here, after you've picked, you'll increase this peg, then wrap the rest of the rows all the way around to the first peg. At that point, we'll just continue wrapping around. So I'll show you more of what we do in the actual process, but I just wanted to give you this section here to make sure that it's totally clear, and hopefully this was helpful. With the 2 flaps done, we're ready to start on the rest of the hat. So we're going to take the orange yarn, tie a slip knot. We're going to slip it over the 6th peg. Then we're going to wrap all the way around to the opposite side 6th peg. Then we're going to use that side peg to tie off. Then we're going to pick the bottom strand of yarn off of every peg that has 3 rows of yarn. So basically at this point it's just the ear flaps. So with all of the rows picked, we're now going to add another row of yarn. We're going to go in the opposite direction, but we're going to add an increase on the next peg and then go all the way back. As we come back to the side that we originally started with the orange yarn, we are going to remember to increase just as we did on the other side. So there's the first slip knot that we put on. Now we're adding an increase. It'll stay on there. And then we're going to tie off the yarn. And then we're going to pick each row that has 3 rows. So again, in this case, at the moment, it is just the ear flaps. So with the pegs all picked, we're going to increase again onto another peg for this row. So if you can't tell, every single row of yarn that we wrap back and forth, we are increasing a peg, remembering to increase on the opposite side as well. So as you can see on this side, we're coming up to where we previously were, and we're going to increase one there as well. So both sides of the loom have an increased stitch. Then we'll pick all of the pegs that have 3 loops of yarn and increase again. Continue wrapping, picking, and increasing until you have only 2 empty pegs left on the loom. When you have 2 empty pegs left on the loom, secure the yarn, then use the pick tool all the way around the loom. Then we're going to secure the brim on the back portion of the hat just behind the ear flaps. Now that we've finished picking, we're going to secure a brim on the back of the hat. We're only going to create the brim on the back portion of the hat just behind the ear flaps. So bring the bottom loop of yarn back up and over the top of each peg, so there's 3 loops of yarn on each peg, and then we'll pick. This is going to be a very small brim, but it's going to keep it from rolling up. With each loop back up and over, then it's time to pick. Then we'll get back to the rest of the hat. We're now ready for the last increase. So wrap the peg and then go all the way back, all the way around the loom. And then as we come around the beginning of the loom, we'll wrap the first peg and then tie off the yarn. And then we'll pick all of the pegs with 3 loops of yarn. From this point forward, we're going to wrap the entire loom with 12 rows. With the 12 rows added, we're now going to change colors. Cut the orange yarn, and we'll tie in the golden yellow yarn. Now add 22 rows of the golden yellow yarn, and we'll be ready for the next step. Now that we've added 22 rows, we're going to use the pick tool and take off the bottom row of yarn so there's only 1 row of yarn on each peg. With the 22 rows added, we're going to cut the yarn and thread it onto a yarn needle. The easiest way to put it on a yarn needle is to take a small piece of paper and wrap it around the yarn. Then take the piece of paper and feed it through the eye of the needle. Then transfer each loop of yarn off of each peg and onto the yarn needle. With the hat off the loom, put the yarn and the yarn needle on the inside of the hat and cinch the hat closed by pulling on the yarn. Then tie it off and cut the remaining strands. Now we're going to make the pom-pom. Take a 3x5 piece of poster board or cardboard and wrap the reddish orange yarn around and around and around and around and around and around and around. That's the base color of the pom-pom. Then we're going to add just a few wraps of the orange as well as the gold colored yarn. Once you're done wrapping, it should look something like this. Next, bunch all the strands together like this. Then take a threaded yarn needle and slide it underneath the strands of yarn. Get the knot as tight as you can make it. And then cut off the yarn needle. Then we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Once you've tied off both sides, slide it off of the card, and then we're going to cut it like this on both sides of the pom-pom. Next, stitch the pom-poms together by slipping the yarn needle through the knot on both ends and then tying it together. Then thread the yarn through the top of the hat and back out. Then go through the top of the pom-pom and through the bottom of the beanie hat. Then thread the yarn through a few stitches and tie it off. Okay, so with the pom-pom secure, we are almost done. We just have a few loose ends. And to take care of those, we will just thread them onto a yarn needle and weave them up into the rest of the hat. If you weave it between the stitches, it does a good job of hiding the threads, and then you don't have any knots to worry about. Once you thread it up high enough, just take some scissors and cut it off. Do this with all of the loose threads on the whole beanie, and we'll be ready for the next step. So with the loose ends tied up, we are now ready to create the loose ends that we want on the hat. If you'll notice, Jayne's hat has about 4 strands of yarn on each end, kind of like tassels to tie the ear flaps together. So cut about 2 feet of yarn, and then we'll double it up so it's actually 1 foot, and then thread it through the middle of each ear flap so that 2 strands hang down 6 inches about, and then tie it off. And then cut the yarn off, and then do it on the other side. Congratulations on your very own Jayne Cobb style beanie hat. Now do me a favor and rate, comment this video, and subscribe if you want more, and share this Pinterest, Facebook with your mama and your daddy and anybody who cares. It really be helping me out. What would the hero of Canton say? Thanks for watching.